So let me just remind you of a quick overview of the quote unquote problem that people can run into inside of meditation and how this relates to trauma. And I know I talked about this in the first session, but it has to do with the myth of Medusa, which came up. Many of you will know Peter Levine and somatic experiencing, which is a really popular psychotherapeutic approach to trauma. And the insights from somatic experiencing, or SE, and a number of different trauma therapies inform my work and inform a lot of different contemplative teacher trainings as far as I've seen. So Spirit Rock here in the Bay, teachers are asked to go through trauma training. Most go through somatic experiencing. I'm sure there's probably a few of you that have either been through the training or you know it well. In his book, In an Unspoken Voice, Levine basically says Medusa is a really helpful myth around understanding trauma, and I think has huge implications for mindfulness. Let me just remind you of it. Basically, Levine's saying, when it comes to trauma, if you ask people to pay direct and sustained attention to experiences of trauma or traumatic stimuli, meaning flashbacks, traumatic sensations, etc., that's like asking people to look into Medusa's eyes. You might remember the myth of Medusa, that she is a superpower that if people look at her directly, they freeze or they turn to stone. And Levine said, this is how you could think about trauma, is that if you're asking a new client, for example, hey, tell me all about your trauma, or go ahead and feel those sensations more intensely, that can become too much too soon for people who are struggling with trauma. So the question inside the work here is, do people have a shield? Proverbially speaking, do they have ways that they can work with Medusa in the domain of their experience? So I think of meditation as like being in Medusa's cave, and do they have shields that they can work with? The setup in meditation is that we're often asking people to attend to some level to their inner world. That could be simply attending to the breath as an anchor. That could be noting thoughts, emotions, or sensations. On some level, there is often some attention internal, which inside this framework will tend to bring people directly into contact with trauma, or Medusa, we could say here. As you will have heard that from the first session, that's not automatically a bad thing. Mindfulness will reveal trauma. In some ways, that is to be expected. But then the question comes in is, do people have tools? And the punchline of really all the work that I'm up to is to say, mindfulness meditation alone is often not sufficient when it comes to trauma, especially when it comes to trying to integrate trauma on some level. We often need more self-regulation tools, and we need modifications to basic mindfulness practice. We covered some of the basic ones in the first session. But that's the basic punchline of the work here.